In the heart of New York City, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and streets buzzed with life, there was a restaurant that stood out from the rest. It wasn't just its elegant decor or the soft glow of chandeliers hanging above polished tables. It was the aura of exclusivity, the kind of place where reservations were hard to come by and even harder to keep. This was Marcus Langston's favorite spot, though he rarely admitted it to anyone. To most people, Marcus was a man who didn't have favorites. He was known as someone who thrived on precision and control, whether in business or personal matters. Tonight, however, things felt different. Marcus sat alone at his usual table near the corner, far enough from other patrons to avoid small talk, but close enough to observe the room. He wore a tailored suit that screamed success, yet something about him seemed off. His shoulders weren't squared like they usually were. Instead, they slouched slightly, betraying a weariness he couldn't quite shake. A glass of deep red wine sat untouched before him, catching the light every time a waiter passed by. Outside, raindrops pattered against the large windows, blurring the neon lights of the city into streaks of color. Marcus stared blankly at the droplets sliding down the glass, lost in thought. Normally, his mind would be racing with strategies for upcoming deals or plans to expand his empire. But tonight it wandered elsewhere, to memories he tried so hard to bury. Memories of growing up poor, living hand to mouth and being told over and over again that he'd never amount to anything. Those days were long behind him now, replaced by wealth and power. Yet no matter how much money he made, or how many accolades he earned, a part of him still felt empty. Like something crucial was missing. The hum of conversation around him faded into the background as he let his thoughts drift further. That's when he heard it. A small, hesitant voice breaking through the haze. At first, he thought he imagined it. No one approached him uninvited, especially not here. But then he saw her. Standing by his table, clutching the hem of her sweater nervously, was a young girl. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Her clothes were simple, faded, jeans and a hoodie too big for her frame, but clean. Her hair was braided neatly, though some strands had escaped framing her face. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the clinking of silverware and murmurs of diners nearby. "Can I sit here?" Marcus blinked, startled. For a moment he didn't know what to say. People didn't just walk up to him like this. Even those who wanted something from him typically sent assistants or emails, not children. He glanced around, half expecting someone, an adult, maybe a parent or guardian, to appear and explain the situation. But no one came. Just her, standing there, looking up at him with wide, hopeful eyes. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. There was nothing extraordinary about her appearance, nothing flashy or attention-grabbing, and yet there was something about her presence that demanded notice. Maybe it was the way she carried herself despite clearly feeling out of place in such an upscale setting, or maybe it was the quiet determination in her voice, as if she'd rehearsed these words 1,000 times before finally gathering the courage to say them aloud. "What's your name?" Marcus asked after a pause, surprising even himself. He hadn't intended to engage with her, but curiosity got the better of him. "Amara," she replied quickly, almost relieved that he'd spoken. "My name is Amara." "Well, Amara," Marcus said, gesturing toward the empty seat across from him. "Have a seat." She hesitated for a second, perhaps unsure if she'd misheard him. Then, slowly, she pulled out the chair and sat down, smoothing her sweater self-consciously. Up close, Marcus noticed details he hadn't seen before. The slight cracks in her sneakers, the faint smudge of dirt on her cheek, the way her hands trembled ever so slightly as she placed them on the table. For a while, neither of them spoke. Marcus sipped his wine, watching her out of the corner of his eye. Amara fidgeted with the edge of the tablecloth, glancing around the room as if trying to memorize every detail. Finally, she looked up at him and said, "This place is really nice." "It is," Marcus agreed, raising an eyebrow. "What brings you here?" Her cheeks flushed pink and she looked down at her lap. I came with my social worker. We were supposed to celebrate today, but..." Her voice trailed off and she bit her lip. But what? Marcus prompted gently. Amara took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for what she was about to say. We were celebrating because I got approved for adoption. My new family was going to take me home today, but... She paused again, blinking rapidly to hold back tears. They changed their minds. They said they weren't ready. So now, I have to go back to foster care. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and raw. Marcus felt a pang in his chest, sharp and unexpected. He knew all too well what it meant to feel unwanted, to be told you weren't good enough. Those feelings were buried deep inside him, locked away behind layers of ambition and achievement. But hearing Amara speak, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes brought them rushing back. Why did you come over here? Marcus asked after a moment, his tone softer than before. Why ask to sit with me? Amara shrugged, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You looked lonely, she said simply. And I thought maybe you wouldn't mind talking to someone who feels the same way. Lonely. The word struck Marcus like a punch to the gut. Was that what he looked like? Lonely. He had everything he could ever want. Money, influence, respect, and yet, sitting across from this little girl, he realized how hollow it all felt. Money couldn't fill the void left by relationships, by connection, by love. As they continued talking, Marcus found himself intrigued by Amara's resilience. Despite everything she'd been through, she still smiled, still hoped. She told him about her dreams of becoming a doctor someday, of helping kids like her who didn't have anyone to turn to. Her optimism was infectious, and for the first time, in years, Marcus felt something stir within him, something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Purpose. By the end of their conversation, Marcus knew two things for certain. First, Amara was unlike anyone he'd ever met. Second, he couldn't just let her walk away. Whatever happened next, whatever decision he made, one thing was clear. This chance encounter in a crowded restaurant had changed him in ways he couldn't yet fully understand. As the evening wore on, Marcus found himself drawn deeper into conversation with Amara. The initial awkwardness of their meeting melted away, replaced by an unexpected ease. Amara's voice, though soft and hesitant at first, grew steadier as she spoke. She told him about her life in foster care, the constant moving from one home to another, never staying long enough to unpack more than a suitcase or two. Each story was tinged with sadness but also resilience, a quiet determination that shone through despite everything she'd endured. I used to hate it, Amara admitted, fiddling with the edge of her sweater again. Every time I got settled, somewhere I'd have to leave. It felt like no one wanted me for real. Her gaze dropped to the table, and for a moment she seemed lost in thought. Then she looked up at Marcus, her eyes bright with something unspoken. But I don't let it bother me anymore. I figure if they didn't want me, it's their loss. Marcus nodded slowly, impressed by her maturity. Most adults he knew wouldn't be able to face rejection so bravely, let alone a child. But there was something else beneath her words, a flicker of pain she tried hard to hide. He could see it in the way her hands trembled slightly when she talked about being sent back, or how her voice wavered ever so subtly when she mentioned the word family. Tell me about your adoption, Marcus said gently, leaning forward, slightly. You said you were supposed to go home today? Amara hesitated, her fingers twisting together in her lap. For a moment it seemed like she might not answer. Then she took a deep breath and began. My social worker said this family had been looking for a kid like me for a while. They even came to visit a few times before today. Everything seemed perfect. They were nice, they had a big house, and they promised we'd do all these cool things together. We went to court this morning and the judge said yes. I really thought this was it, like finally I'd have someone who cared about me forever. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she quickly looked down, brushing away a tear that slipped down her cheek. Marcus felt his throat tighten. He wanted to say something, anything to comfort her, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he reached across the table and placed a hand over hers. It was a small gesture, but it seemed to steady her. They changed their minds after court, Amara continued, her voice quieter now. They said they weren't ready, that it wasn't the right time. I don't know what that means, but I guess it doesn't matter anyway. The point is, I'm still here, still waiting. The weight of her words hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Marcus couldn't imagine what it must feel like to be told you weren't good enough, not once, but over and over again. To have hope dangled in front of you only to have it snatched away at the last moment. He thought back to his own childhood, to the countless times he'd been told he'd never succeed, that he'd always be stuck in the same cycle of poverty and struggle. Those memories had driven him to build his empire, to prove everyone wrong. But sitting here now, listening to Amara, he realized success meant nothing without connection, without love. What happens next? Marcus asked after a pause, his tone careful. Do you go back to the same foster home? Amara shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant, though her eyes betrayed her uncertainty. I think so. My social worker says she'll find another family soon, but she trailed off, biting her lip. It's hard to believe her now. Every time I start hoping, something goes wrong. I just wish, I don't know, maybe I wish I could stop hoping altogether. It hurts too much. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her closely. There was wisdom in her words far beyond her years, a kind of weary acceptance that shouldn't belong to someone so young. Yet beneath the surface, he could see glimpses of the girl she truly was. Bright, curious, full of dreams she dared not speak aloud. You're strong, Marcus said finally, his voice firm. Stronger than most people I know. Don't lose that. Amara blinked, surprised by the compliment. A faint smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Thanks, she murmured. I try. Their conversation shifted then, moving away from the heaviness of her past toward lighter topics. Amara lit up as she talked about her favorite subjects in school, science and math, and how she loved solving puzzles and learning new things. She dreamed of becoming a doctor someday, she told him, someone who could help kids like her who didn't have anyone to turn to. I want to make sure no one feels as alone as I do, she explained earnestly. If I can fix even one person's life, it'll be worth it. Marcus listened intently, captivated by her passion. It reminded him of himself when he was younger, the relentless drive to create something meaningful, to leave a mark on the world. Only Amara's purpose wasn't rooted in ambition or wealth. It came from a place of compassion, of wanting to heal rather than conquer. In that moment, he saw not just a child in need, but a potential force for good, a spark that needed nurturing. As the hours passed, the restaurant began to empty around them. Waiters cleared tables quietly, casting occasional glances at the unlikely pair seated in the corner. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the glow of streetlights. Marcus glanced at his watch, realizing how late it had gotten. We should probably get you home, he said reluctantly, signaling for the check. Your social worker will worry if you're out too late. Amara nodded, though her expression dimmed slightly at the thought of leaving. Yeah, I guess so, she replied, sliding out of her chair. As Marcus stood to accompany her, she turned to face him, her eyes searching his. Thank you for letting me sit with you, she said softly. And for listening. Not many people do that. Marcus smiled, though it felt unfamiliar on his face. Thank you for sharing your story. He replied. Not many people are brave enough to do that. They walked out of the restaurant together, the cool night air wrapping around them like a comforting embrace. As they approached the curb where Amara's social worker waited, Marcus hesitated. Something inside him, a feeling he couldn't quite name, told him this wasn't the end. That somehow their paths were meant to cross for a reason greater than either of them understood. Good night, Amara, he said finally, offering her a small wave. Good night, Mr. Langston, she replied, smiling shyly before climbing into the car. As the vehicle pulled away, Marcus stood there for a long moment, watching until its taillights disappeared into the distance. His mind raced with thoughts of what he'd heard tonight, of the little girl who had walked into his life unexpectedly and left an indelible mark. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. Amara had changed him. And change, he realized, was exactly what he needed. The ride home that night was quiet, but Marcus's mind buzzed with a storm of thoughts. He sat in the back seat of his sleek black car, staring out at the rain-soaked streets as they blurred past. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement, creating streaks of gold and red, but Marcus barely noticed. His thoughts were consumed by one face, Amara's. Her words echoed in his head, not just the ones she'd said casually during their conversation, but the raw honesty behind them. She had opened up to him in a way few people ever did, trusting him with her pain, her hopes, and her dreams. What struck Marcus most was how much she reminded him of himself. Not just her resilience or determination, but the loneliness she carried. Growing up, Marcus had felt invisible, like no one cared whether he succeeded or failed. He remembered nights spent hungry, wondering if anyone would notice if he disappeared. Those feelings had fueled his rise to success, pushing him to work harder, achieve more, and prove everyone wrong. But now, sitting here in the lap of luxury, he realized something. All the money in the world couldn't erase the scars of being unwanted. As the car pulled into the underground parking garage of his penthouse, Marcus stepped out and made his way to the elevator. The marble floors gleamed under soft lighting, and the faint hum of classical music filled the air. Normally, this space brought him comfort, a reminder of how far he'd come, but tonight it felt hollow, empty, like the silence you hear when you're surrounded by noise but still feel utterly alone. He unlocked his apartment door and stepped inside, tossing his keys onto the glass-topped table by the entrance. The penthouse was immaculate, every piece of furniture carefully chosen to reflect his taste for modern elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the city skyline, but Marcus didn't bother looking. Instead, he poured himself a glass of whiskey and sank into the leather armchair by the fireplace, even though the flames weren't lit. And then it hit him, the memory he'd tried so hard to bury. It came rushing back like a tidal wave, unbidden and unstoppable. He was 8 years old again, standing on the front steps of a foster home, clutching a tattered backpack that held everything he owned. The couple who had taken him in argued loudly behind closed doors while he waited outside, shivering in the cold. Eventually they emerged, shaking their heads. "We can't handle him," they said, as if he weren't standing right there, as if he weren't a person with feelings. That night he cried himself to sleep in yet another stranger's bed, vowing never to let anyone hurt him like that again. Marcus took a long sip of his drink, trying to steady himself. He hadn't thought about that moment in years. But Amara's story had dragged it back to the surface. She wasn't just some random girl he'd met in a restaurant. She was a mirror reflecting parts of himself he'd rather forget. And those 4 words she'd said earlier, "You can save me," kept replaying in his mind. They weren't just a plea for help. They were a challenge. A test of whether he could be the kind of man he claimed to be, or if he was content to remain the same isolated, self-serving figure he'd always been. For hours, Marcus wrestled with his thoughts. He paced the length of his penthouse, from the kitchen to the living room to the balcony overlooking the city. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the enormity of what Amara had asked of him. Saving someone wasn't easy. It required time, effort, sacrifice, things Marcus wasn't sure he was ready to give. Yet deep down, he knew he couldn't ignore her either. Something inside him, a tiny voice he'd silenced long ago, was screaming at him to act. To do something. Anything. By morning, Marcus hadn't slept a wink. Exhaustion clung to him like a second skin, but his resolve was clearer than it had ever been. He called his assistant first thing, barking orders before she'd even finished, saying hello. "Get me the number for child services," he demanded. "I need to speak to someone about fostering a child." His assistant hesitated, clearly caught off guard. "Fostering, sir? Are you certain?" "Yes," Marcus snapped, though his tone softened almost immediately. "Just get me the information, please." Over the next few days, Marcus threw himself into the process with the same intensity he brought to his business ventures. He met with social workers, filled out endless forms, and subjected himself to background checks and home inspections. At times, it felt overwhelming, especially since he had no prior experience with children. But every time doubt crept in, he pictured Amara's face, the hope in her eyes, the courage it must have taken to approach him in that restaurant, and pushed forward. Meanwhile, Amara returned to her foster home, unsure of what to make of her encounter with Marcus. She didn't expect to hear from him again. After all, why would a wealthy, powerful man like him care about someone like her? Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to dream, not just about having a family, but about what life might look like if someone truly believed in her. One afternoon, as she sat in her room sketching pictures of doctors and patients, her social worker knocked on the door. "Amara," the woman said gently, "we need to talk." Amara's heart raced. Had something gone wrong again? Was she being moved to another home? But instead of bad news, the social worker smiled warmly and handed her a letter. "Someone has expressed interest in becoming your guardian," she explained. "They're going through the necessary steps to make it official." Amara stared at the envelope in her hands, her name written neatly across the front. Slowly, she opened it and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. As she read the words, her breath caught in her throat. It was from Marcus Langston. "I've thought a lot about our conversation," the note began, "and I want you to know that I believe in you. If you'll let me, I'd like to help you build the future you deserve." Tears welled up in Amara's eyes as she clutched the letter to her chest. For so long, she'd carried the weight of her circumstances alone, convinced that no one would ever truly see her. But now, for the first time, she felt seen, truly seen, and maybe, just maybe, saved. Back at his penthouse, Marcus received confirmation that his application was moving forward. Relief washed over him, mixed with a strange sense of anticipation. He had no idea what lay ahead, no roadmap for how to raise a child. But as he stood by the window, gazing out at the city below, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Amara's 4 words had frozen him in place that night in the restaurant, forcing him to confront the emptiness he'd been running from. Now they were thawing something within him, something warm and alive, something that reminded him what it meant to be human. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind for both Marcus and Amara. For Marcus, it meant stepping into unfamiliar territory, navigating the complexities of foster care systems, legal procedures, and emotional preparation. He had built his life on precision and control, but this was different. There were no spreadsheets to analyze or board meetings to dominate. This was about trust, patience, and learning how to connect with someone whose world was vastly different from his own. For Amara, the wait felt endless. Every day brought a mix of excitement and anxiety. She didn't want to get her hopes up again, not after the heartbreak she'd endured. But something about Marcus made her believe maybe, just maybe, things could work out this time. His note had been simple, yet it carried a weight that stayed with her. Someone believed in her. That thought alone gave her strength during moments when doubt crept in. Finally, the day arrived. After countless interviews, evaluations, and paperwork, Marcus officially became Amara's legal guardian. It wasn't adoption yet, but it was a start. When the social worker called to confirm the news, Amara couldn't contain her joy. She hugged the woman tightly, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere, like she mattered. Marcus picked her up from her foster home later that afternoon. He stood awkwardly by his car, dressed in slacks and a crisp button-down shirt, holding a bouquet of flowers he'd bought at the last minute. "I wasn't sure what you'd like," he admitted as she approached, handing them to her. "But I thought these might brighten your day." Amara accepted the flowers with wide eyes, clutching them close to her chest. They're beautiful, she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. Thank you. The drive to Marcus's penthouse was quiet but comfortable. Neither of them spoke much, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was filled with unspoken understanding. Amara stared, out the window, taking in the cityscape that stretched endlessly before her. She had lived in New York her whole life, but seeing it from the back seat of Marcus's luxury car felt like experiencing it for the first time. When they arrived, Marcus led her inside, giving her a brief tour of the apartment. The sleek design and modern furnishings left Amara in awe. "This place is amazing," she whispered, running her fingers along the smooth surface of the dining table. "It's home now," Marcus replied, watching her closely. "You're home." Her gaze snapped to his, searching for reassurance. "Really? Really?" he confirmed with a small smile. "Come on, I want to show you something." He guided her down a hallway to one of the guest rooms which had been transformed overnight. The walls were painted a soft lavender, her favorite color according to the social worker. A cozy bed sat in the center, adorned with fluffy pillows, and a quilt stitched with intricate patterns. Shelves lined one wall stocked with books, art supplies, and puzzles. On the desk beside the window rested a laptop and a handwritten note. "Welcome, Amara. This is your fresh start." Tears welled up in her eyes as she took it all in. "Did you do this for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted you to feel welcome," Marcus said, shifting uncomfortably. "If there's anything else you need, we can add it. I want you to know you're important here." Amara turned to face him, her expression a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "No one's ever done anything like this for me before," she murmured. Then, without warning, she threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly. "Thank you." Marcus froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. Physical affection wasn't something he was used to, especially not from a child. But as he hesitantly returned the hug, something shifted inside him. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just about providing a roof over her head or buying her things. It was about creating a bond. A family. Over the next few months, Marcus and Amara settled into their new routine. It wasn't always easy. Marcus was still adjusting to the demands of parenthood, and Amara struggled with feelings of insecurity. She worried constantly about doing something wrong, about disappointing him. But they worked through it together, slowly building trust. 1. Evening, as they sat side by side on the couch watching a movie, Amara turned to Marcus and asked, "Do you think I'll ever stop feeling scared?" Marcus paused the film, looking at her intently. "Scared of what?" "Of messing up. Of not being good enough," she admitted, picking at the hem of her pajama sleeve. "I keep thinking maybe you'll change your mind about me." Marcus sighed, setting the remote aside. "Amara, listen to me. You don't have to be perfect. Nobody is. What matters is that you try and that you care, and I'm not going anywhere. Okay?" She nodded, though tears glistened in her eyes. "Okay." As time went on, their relationship grew stronger. Marcus learned to listen more and lecture less. He discovered Amara's love for science and signed her up for a robotics club at school. She, in turn, taught him how to laugh freely, filling the penthouse with sounds of joy it hadn't known in years. They spent weekends exploring museums, trying new foods, and simply enjoying each other's company. One Saturday morning, while flipping pancakes in the kitchen, Marcus glanced over at Amara, who was drawing at the dining table. "What are you working on?" he asked. "A card for Mrs. Peterson," she replied, referring to her teacher. "She helped me with my science project last week." "That's thoughtful of you," Marcus said, sliding a pancake onto her plate. "You know, kindness like that goes a long way." Amara smiled, adding another stroke of color to her artwork. "That's what you've done for me," she said quietly. "You've been kind." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat. "And you've reminded me what it means to care," he replied, ruffling her hair playfully. "We're helping each other, aren't we?" She grinned, nodding enthusiastically. "Yeah, we are." By the end of their first year together, it was clear that both of them had changed in profound ways. Marcus had softened. becoming more patient and empathetic. Amara had blossomed, growing confident in herself and her abilities. Together, they proved that families aren't defined by blood. They're built on love, effort, and shared experiences. Late one night, as Marcus tucked Amara into bed, she looked up at him and said, "You know, you saved me." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And you saved me too, kiddo, just by believing I could be more than my wealth." As he turned off the light and closed her bedroom door behind him, Marcus felt a sense of peace he hadn't known was possible. He had taken a leap of faith, a risk he never imagined himself taking, and it had paid off in ways he couldn't have dreamed of. Amara wasn't just his responsibility anymore, she was his daughter, and together they were building a future neither of them had dared to hope for. As the years passed, Marcus and Amara's bond deepened in ways neither of them could have predicted. Their lives became intertwined, not just through daily routines, but through shared triumphs and challenges that shaped them both. Marcus, once a man who thrived on solitude and control, found himself embracing the chaos of parenthood with unexpected enthusiasm. Amara, meanwhile, flourished under his guidance, her confidence growing as she discovered new passions and talents. One of the biggest milestones came during Amara's high school years. She had always been a bright student, excelling in math and science, but it was her determination that truly set her apart. Every evening after finishing her homework, she would sit at the dining table poring over medical journals or practicing anatomy diagrams. Her dream of becoming a doctor hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown stronger with time. Seeing her dedication inspired Marcus to support her fully, not just financially, but emotionally. "You're going to change lives," Marcus told her one night as they sat together in the living room. "I can already see it." Amara smiled, though there was a hint of nervousness in her eyes. "What if I'm not good enough?" she asked softly. "What if I fail?" Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious yet kind. "Failure isn't the end, it's part of the journey. Trust me, I've failed more times than I can count. But every setback taught me something valuable, and so will yours. You've got this, Amara. I believe in you." Her shoulders relaxed, slightly reassured by his words. Over the years, Marcus had become more than just a guardian. He was her cheerleader, her confidant, and sometimes even her toughest critic. He pushed her to work harder while reminding her to take breaks and celebrate small victories along the way. Their dynamic was unique, built on mutual respect and trust. When Amara received her acceptance letter to Columbia University's pre-med program, their joy knew no bounds. They celebrated with a dinner at her favorite restaurant, where they laughed and reminisced about how far they'd come since that fateful night in the upscale eatery years ago. As they toasted to her achievement, Amara raised her glass and said, "This wouldn't have happened without you, Marcus. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat. "Thank you for showing me what really matters," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You've made me a better person." College brought new adventures and challenges for Amara. Balancing academics, extracurriculars, and personal growth wasn't easy, but she tackled each obstacle head-on. Marcus remained a constant source of support, attending parent-teacher conferences, helping her study for exams, and offering advice whenever she needed it. On weekends, they often spent hours talking about everything from molecular biology to philosophy, their conversations spanning topics as vast as their imaginations. During one particularly stressful semester, Amara called Marcus late at night, her voice trembling with frustration. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, tears evident in her tone. "It feels like too much." Marcus listened patiently, letting her vent before responding. "Remember why you started," he reminded her gently. "You're doing this because you want to make a difference, because you care. And yes, it's hard, but you're stronger than you think. Take it one step at a time, okay? I'm here if you need me." His words calmed her, grounding her in the purpose that had driven her all along. By the end of the call, she sounded more hopeful, thanking him for always knowing exactly what to say. It was moments like these that reinforced their connection, proving that family wasn't just about being present, it was about showing up when it mattered most. As graduation approached, Amara prepared for the next chapter of her journey, medical school. The application process was grueling, requiring countless essays, interviews, and recommendations, but she faced it with the same resilience she'd shown throughout her life. When she finally received her acceptance letter to Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, she ran straight to Marcus, waving the envelope above her head like a trophy. "We did it," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around him. "I'm going to be a doctor." Marcus hugged her tightly, pride swelling in his chest. "You worked so hard for this," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I couldn't be prouder of you." Their celebration extended beyond just the two of them. That evening, Marcus hosted a small gathering at his penthouse, inviting close friends and mentors who had supported Amara over the years. As guests mingled and congratulated her, Amara stood beside Marcus, beaming with gratitude. At one point, she grabbed a microphone and addressed the crowd. "I wouldn't be standing here today without this man right here," she said, gesturing toward Marcus. "He saved me, not with money, but with hope. He showed me that I was worth fighting for, and now I want to do the same for others. To everyone here, thank you for believing in me. You've helped shape who I am, and I promise to pay it forward." The room erupted in applause, and Marcus wiped away a tear, overwhelmed by her heartfelt words. In that moment, he realized how much they had both grown. Amara had transformed from a shy, uncertain girl into a confident, compassionate young woman, ready to make her mark on the world. And he, once consumed by ambition and material success, had rediscovered the true meaning of fulfillment, love, connection, and purpose. But their story didn't end there. Inspired by their journey, Marcus decided to use his resources to help other children like Amara. He founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting foster kids and providing scholarships for higher education. Together, they named it after those 4 life-changing words Amara had spoken that night in the restaurant: "You can save me." Through the foundation, Marcus and Amara worked tirelessly to create opportunities for disadvantaged youth, hosting workshops, mentorship, programs, and fundraisers. They traveled across the country, sharing their story and encouraging others to get involved. Amara often spoke at events, her voice steady and powerful as she recounted her experiences and urged people to take action. "Every child deserves a chance," she would say passionately. "A chance to dream, to grow, to thrive. No one should feel invisible or unwanted. Together, we can make sure they know they matter." As the years went by, their efforts bore fruit. Countless lives were touched by the Foundation's work, and stories of transformation poured in from all corners. Children who had once felt hopeless found new paths forward, thanks to the opportunities provided by Marcus and Amara's vision. It was a legacy neither of them had anticipated, yet one they embraced wholeheartedly. Looking back, Marcus marveled at how much had changed since that rainy evening in the restaurant. What began as a simple act of kindness had blossomed into something extraordinary, a partnership, a family, and a mission to uplift others. He often joked that Amara had saved him just as much as he had saved her, and in many ways it was true. Through her courage and resilience, she had reminded him of the power of compassion and the importance of human connection. And so, as Amara embarked on her medical career and Marcus continued expanding their foundation, they carried with them the lessons they had learned along the way. Life wasn't perfect, it never would be, but together, they had proven that love and determination could overcome even the greatest odds. Their story was proof that sometimes all it takes is 4 little words to change a life forever. Years passed, and Amara's journey reached its next milestone, medical school graduation. The ceremony took place on a crisp spring morning at Johns Hopkins University, where rows of proud families filled the auditorium. Marcus sat in the front row, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, his chest swelling with pride as he watched Amara walk across the stage to receive her diploma. Her name echoed through the hall, met with thunderous applause, but for Marcus it felt like the entire world had paused just for this moment. When the ceremony ended, Amara rushed over to him, her cap slightly askew and her face glowing with excitement. "We did it," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around him in an enthusiastic hug. "I'm officially Dr. Amara Langston." Marcus laughed, pulling her close. "You've earned every bit of it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't be prouder." That evening they celebrated with a small gathering at Marcus's penthouse. Friends, mentors, and colleagues joined them, filling the space with laughter and heartfelt congratulations. As the night wore on, Amara stood up to make a speech, holding a glass of sparkling cider in one hand. She scanned the room, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "I wouldn't be here without the people in this room," she began, her voice steady yet warm. "But most of all, I wouldn't be here without Marcus." She turned to look at him, her expression softening. "The night we met, I didn't know what would happen. I just knew I needed someone to listen, to believe in me when I didn't believe in myself. And Marcus did that. He gave me more than a home. He gave me hope. He taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about love, sacrifice, and showing up when it matters most." The room erupted into applause, and Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes. He had spent so much of his life chasing success, thinking wealth and power defined him. But standing there, surrounded by the people who mattered most, he realized, none of that compared to the joy of seeing Amara thrive. She wasn't just his daughter now. She was his partner in making the world a better place. After completing her residency, Amara began working as a pediatrician at a hospital in New York City, focusing on underserved communities. It was a role tailor-made for her compassionate nature and tireless drive. Every day she walked into the hospital with purpose, determined to provide care not only for her patients' bodies, but also for their spirits. Many of the children she treated reminded her of herself, young, scared, and longing for someone to tell them they mattered. In those moments, she channeled everything Marcus had taught her: kindness, patience, and unwavering belief in the potential of others. Meanwhile, Marcus continued expanding their foundation. "You Can Save Me." What had started as a small initiative grew into a nationwide movement, impacting thousands of lives. They partnered with schools, community centers, and foster care agencies to offer scholarships, mentorship programs, and resources for children in need. Together, Marcus and Amara traveled frequently, speaking at conferences and hosting events to raise awareness about the challenges faced by foster youth. At one such event, held in a grand ballroom in Los Angeles, Amara delivered a keynote address that left the audience spellbound. Standing behind the podium, she shared her story openly: the pain of rejection, the loneliness of foster care, and the transformative power of being believed in. "When I was a child," she said, her voice resonating through the room, "I dreamed of becoming a doctor because I wanted to heal others, but I never imagined I'd find healing myself along the way." Marcus showed me that saving someone doesn't mean fixing everything for them. It means giving them the tools and courage to fix themselves. That's what our foundation is all about: empowering kids to dream bigger than their circumstances. As the crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation, Marcus stood backstage, watching her with admiration. Amara had grown into a force of nature, a beacon of hope for countless children who felt unseen and unheard. She carried herself with grace and strength, qualities he recognized as reflections of her own struggles and triumphs. Back home, their bond remained unshakable. Even with demanding schedules, they made time for each other, whether it was sharing meals, taking long walks through Central Park, or simply sitting together on quiet evenings. One night, as they sat side by side on the couch flipping through old photo albums, Amara paused at a picture of them from years ago, her tiny frame dwarfed by Marcus's towering presence as they posed awkwardly outside the restaurant where they first met. "Do you remember that night?" she asked, smiling fondly. "Of course I do," Marcus replied. "How could I forget? You changed my life." Amara tilted her head, studying him thoughtfully. "You changed mine too. I used to think no one would ever want me, but then you came along and proved me wrong." Marcus chuckled softly, ruffling her hair playfully. And look at you now, saving lives, inspiring people, proving everyone else wrong too. Their laughter filled the room, light and genuine. It struck Marcus how far they'd come, not just individually but together. He often reflected on the irony of it all. A man who once valued control above all else had found true fulfillment in letting go, in opening his heart to someone who needed him. And in return, she had given him something money couldn't buy: purpose. As the years went on, their legacy continued to grow. Children whose lives were touched by the foundation went on to achieve incredible things, becoming teachers, engineers, artists, and leaders in their communities. Stories poured in from across the country, each one a testament to the ripple effect of compassion. A young boy named Ethan, once shy and withdrawn, became the first in his family to attend college thanks to a scholarship from the foundation. A teenage girl named Maya discovered her passion for photography after attending one of their creative workshops, eventually landing a job with a prestigious magazine. These stories weren't just successes, they were reminders of the impact one act of kindness could have. One evening, as Marcus and Amara sat together on the balcony of the penthouse, gazing out at the glittering city skyline, Amara turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that night?" Marcus considered the question for a moment before answering. "Sure, I think about it sometimes, but honestly, I don't think it's about what would have happened. It's about what did happen. We found each other when we needed each other most, and because of that we've been able to help so many others." Amara nodded, leaning her head against his shoulder. "It feels like everything has come full circle," she murmured. "Like maybe we were meant to meet, not just for us but for everyone we've helped since." Marcus smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "Maybe we were." In the end, their story wasn't just about two people brought together by chance. It was about the power of connection, the courage to take risks, and the belief that even the smallest acts of kindness can create waves of change. Marcus and Amara had proven that love transcends boundaries, whether they're built by wealth, circumstance, or fear. Together, they had created a family, a mission, and a legacy that would endure for generations. As the lights of the city twinkled below them, Marcus whispered, "Thank you, Amara, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." She squeezed his hand gently, smiling. "Thank you for showing me what it means to truly save someone." And in that moment, surrounded by the hum of the city and the warmth of their bond, they both knew their journey was far from over. But whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, just as they always had.